Good morning and welcome to our informal / academic excellence committee meeting. I am going to turn this over to our chair of academic excellence, Dr. Tanya Howard Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Academic Excellence Committee. We have 2 members on our committee, 3 including myself, Ms. Hall, Mr. Smith, and myself. So since we don't have a quorum, we will not be voting to approve the agenda, but we will continue with our presentation. We have 3 topics of discussion on today from the Department of Academic Affairs: dual enrollment update, work-based learning, and learning loss strategies. We've received a lot of phone calls and emails regarding concerns about learning loss. We missed days due to the storm, so we have the experts here today to talk with us about the strategies that they will be implementing to enhance and continue with student achievement. I ask the board members, if you would please jot down your questions and write down the slide number and ask questions at the end of each topic. So for 3.01, you have dual enrollment. After that presentation, you can ask questions. Then we have another presentation, work-based learning. After that presentation, without interruptions, we can ask questions. Then we go to 3.02, learning loss strategies. So with that being said, I ask that the presenters please come forward. And as they're coming forward, I'd like to give the opportunity for our lead learner, Dr. Watts, for remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to delay the presentation because we do have 3 pretty meaty presentations, and I do want to provide time for the board to ask questions. But it's always exciting to be here. This committee is an important committee. Our aspirations around academic excellence for all of our students is one we strive for each and every day. So with that said, I am excited to turn it over to Ms. McGuire to kick us off with our dual enrollment presentation.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The information that I will be presenting to you this morning, some of it you may be familiar with, but some of it is also a preview of some board policy changes that were done at Georgia DOE that will be presented to you in December, but we wanted to give you a preview as it relates to this part of the presentation. And so you are probably familiar with our traditional dual enrollment, which leads students to a traditional high school diploma. This is reserved for primarily our students in 11th and 12th grades. They are limited to 30 semester hours that are paid for by the state. They must meet the post-secondary institution's requirements, which may include a 3.0 GPA or ACT or SAT scores, and then they also must still meet our 24-unit requirements for graduation. 10th graders can participate, but they must have either a 1200 on the SAT or 26 ACT, or they can take CTAE-related courses as a part of this is designed to help students gain skills that they will need to go into the workforce. The component of this that has changed, you may remember that we've presented about the Accelerated Career Diploma, which was added about 2 years ago as an option for dual enrollment students. But there are some changes as it relates to courses that students must complete. Students have to complete 9 courses at the high school level, but the state has made changes within that language to just state, instead of it saying students must take American Lit, now it says that they must take 2 English courses, one of which must include wherever the state has designated the EOC. And you will see that the same thing has occurred for math and science. In addition to those 2 units in English, math, and science, the other option that has changed is as it relates to social studies. Students may take any 2 social studies courses. Those used to be specific. Now they can take any 2, but the other caveat is they can substitute one of those 2 with a math course. And this may be relative to that student's post-secondary plans or that job that the student or career that the student wants to pursue. In addition to having the 9 courses, students must complete one of the 3 options that are shown here. That's an associate's degree, a technical college diploma, or they have to complete 2 certificates. There is a high demand career list, of course, trying to recruit more employees for those career fields where we need additional workers. But one of the other big changes that you will see is that students that are pursuing the accelerated career diploma are not limited to those 30 semester hours being paid for through dual enrollment. So they have increased that because typically an associate's degree will typically take you longer than those 30 hours that have been allotted. Now, with respect to our data and just some trends, we have seen an increase in our dual enrollment participation since 2022. We have had an increase in the number of students that participated in 24, and we have New Hampstead, Woodville, Savannah Arts that had the highest number of students participate in 2024. On the next slides, you will see, and one of the things that we want to highlight is that of our students enrolled, 84% of the courses that were taken were successfully completed. Now, that's indicated by a student earning a 70 or higher. We do convert the college grade, which is a letter grade, we convert that to a numeric scale. And so this reflects students who have a 70 or higher on their transcripts. Also, we've seen an increase in the number of students that are participating in dual enrollment. That increased from 23 to 24. And so one of the things that I want to point out on the data slide that you will see here, where you see the 17%, what that actually reflects is when the state looks at our data for CCRPI, they are looking at the total number of students in that 12th grade class who have attempted a dual enrollment course. So that denominator is our total 12th grade enrollment, not just the students who took a dual enrollment class. You will see that we had 708 students participate in 24, which is an increase from the 543 that participated in 23. And then this slide just reflects that 84%, so you can see the total number of courses that our students attempted or took successfully completed in 24 also increased from 1,882 to 2,100. So this just reflects, again, I believe in some respects, coming out of COVID, students wanting to pursue more options. Also just as we look at the dual enrollment support slides, we begin that advisement process, that notification process in 8th grade. Our 8th grade counselors have to share information with students and parents about dual enrollment. Even though they cannot take the courses until potentially 10th grade, we want to make sure that their program of study aligns and allows them to pursue those options should they want to. In addition, with that advisement and course registration process at the high school level, we are working with the post-secondary institutions to better or to make sure that we are having students take courses that actually align better with their post-secondary plans. So just to give you an example of that, for most institutions, you don't need to take sociology and psychology depending on the area. So to maximize those 30 units, we want to make sure that you are looking at the college's core curriculum and taking those courses that will actually help save you time and money once you get to that institution. Another piece of that is looking at the certificates or the diplomas that you're pursuing, making sure that that aligns with whatever career field you're looking at, and also making sure that you're aware of what those high demand career fields are in our area. Our counselors, as well as our post-secondary institutions, have orientation sessions. Previously, we were just having the students go to the orientation session at the college, but we've instituted our own to make sure that students understand the requirements both at the college and at the high school. And then lastly, one of the things that we started is dual enrollment check-in sessions. This allows for us, because the colleges do not have to give us grade reports on a regular basis, we have to depend on those students to make sure that they are checking their grades. Parents can't even just go and check. They have to have a FERPA form completed before they can even receive that information. So we're trying to engage our students to make sure that they're logging in. We know ahead of time if we're seeing, where they are having some difficulty, and we can refer them to appropriate resources. So those are just some of the things that we are doing as it relates to dual enrollment in order to help ensure the success of our students.
Any questions from board members? Dr. Bremen?
I would just like the district to continue to be open to looking at how we calculate GPAs based off of dual enrollment. I know that we currently use the midpoint, and in some classes we will give them 5 points, so that gets them to 100. I know that's not all of the dual enrollment classes. I also know that we give more points to honors and more points to AP because that probably looks better for us on the ways that our school district is weighted outside of the district. But a lot of high-performing students choose the AP route knowing that they can get to 105 versus the dual enrollment where they think they're just going to get the 95. So I know that we knock the feet out of some of our high-performing students because they won't choose dual enrollment because they're playing the game of GPA and AP. And I'm sure that we're advising students, AP looks better for some schools that you're trying to go to. Some of them won't even open your app if you don't take enough APs. I don't know if that's the same as dual enrollment, but I really would like us to see what other districts are doing on that. I know we've had a very impassioned student that comes quite often. Bless him, they're awesome. Like, that's the type of student we need to tell us, hey, this is disadvantaging me, but I know it's disadvantaging other students. My daughter, 9th grade, knew I'm not taking any dual enrollment. Like, that was off the table because she knew that an A would get her a 95, and she wasn't happy with a 95. So I would love for us to have a broader discussion. We don't need to have it now, but there are students that decide not to take them because of how that GPA is calculated.
Well, if I may add, while we use the midpoint, and so for an A it is a 95, they still receive 5 points, which would take them to 100. So if that's not happening.
No, but that happens. But if I take an AP course
right,
and I make
go
100,
above 100,
I can make
right.
105.
Now,
And that is what the high performing student sees. That my ceiling is 105, not 100, and 100 doesn't win for what they're chasing.
Understood.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think in just us looking at that was the fact that when you look at each college, their grading scale may vary as it relates to what an A, B, C, D, what have you is. And so we will take a look
Yeah.
at it. That was the most equitable thing that we could identify at the time.
It's a sticky situation. It is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sticky situation because there are also universities that use pluses and minuses. So I have students that
Correct.
apply to my programs that are disadvantaged because their university of choice uses pluses and minuses,
Correct.
which change their GPA. But somebody that's 2 hours down the road at
Correct.
University X that only does A's and B's made the exact same grade in the course, but GPA-wise is off by like 0.2. So just a continued conversation.
Understood.
Thank you.
Dr. Brown, Hoskins Brown.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for your presentation. I've had visits from a couple of dual enrollment students this year interested in science majors, one marine science and one in others. And I was wondering how or are our dual enrollment students accessing the entry-level entry-level biology, intro to marine science type courses. I don't see that, well, I don't teach that course. I don't know or see if that's happening. I know part of it is sequence, that some of those are only offered in the fall, and they may not be ready for it when they first start, and when they're about to graduate, it's not being offered. But I'm just wondering about that because the transcripts of the young people that I've seen have been pretty much humanities. And I'm just wondering if there is a way for them to get a leg up on some of the intro science courses for the majors that they're looking at.
Okay. And one of the things, as I mentioned, that we're trying to work more with the post-secondary institutions because that is their area of expertise. And so that is something, we've had them to actually come to the school so that we can sit down with the student's transcript, looking at strengths, and looking also at post-secondary plans, and making, those decisions. But that is something that we'll communicate further with our post-secondary institutions so that they're pushing more of those STEM and STEAM courses for
Okay.
our students.
That would be good to see and good to know. And for those conversations, some students, the academic advisor as well as the professional advisor may need to be present because sometimes the professional advisor pushes intro history, intro English, intro math, and they say you can do the science later, whereas that intro to the science class may be the carrot that student needs to kind of amplify their effort. And so what I find is if you go to the major advisor, and actually say major advisor versus professional advisor. So you have the core professional advisors that are advising everybody, and then you have the advisors in the major who actually know what the curriculum is, what the syllabus is like in that class, and looking at how that student has done in some of their other courses, they can assess, yeah, you're probably ready, or no, you do not need to take this now. So you probably have more than one professional at the university that you may want to speak to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kabrowski, then Mrs. Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And I made a note similar to what Dr. Bringman mentioned as far as the grades, and I understand the challenges. But I just want to echo support for evaluating if there's a way to somehow or another, I don't know what that answer is, but, and then the other question, and this is something that can be provided later, is the difference between, or when a student is being advised on joint enrollment versus AP, can you talk a little bit maybe now about the decision, like if the student doesn't know what college they want to go to or what career path they want to, they know they want to go to college, that's it. How is that, how are students typically guided? And then the second part of the question is, what is the difference for the district when we look at how students either are evaluated, funding sources, those kind of bigger picture elements, and are any of those guiding the decisions for AP versus joint enrollment? Does that all make sense?
So typically, starting in January of each year is when we're actually having those individual conversations based on the student's transcript. Prior to that, a lot of the schools are having general information sessions just about the dual enrollment process, what's available to them, funding sources, and things of that nature. Some more of those in-depth conversations about dual enrollment, because they can't start until 11th grade, are generally happen that second semester of their sophomore year. With AP, it depends on the number of AP courses that that particular school is offering. At some schools, they may begin taking an AP course in 9th grade. At others, that may happen in 10th grade. So those individual sessions happen with our school counselors as they're doing pre-registration processes, typically in the spring of the year, so that they can make sure that the student has the test scores needed. We're looking at the GPA that the student has, the college's requirements, things of that nature. So that's typically when that happens. With respect to funding, I will say that a lot of times that is not happening until you get closer to 12th grade, because it can be difficult, unless you have a firmer idea of what post-secondary institution you're going to go to, as far as how those courses will impact. Again, a lot of our, a lot of our counselors are recommending those courses in A through F, just because those are the classes that you're going to have to take anyway, and would help, alleviate some of that financial burden that would, be placed there. If I'm getting to your question, the other part is it also depends on like the type of course. If you're talking about a welding course, for example, that does carry additional funding that dual enrollment does not necessarily, that core academic courses that don't necessarily account for, or lab fees or things like that. So a part of that is the conversation as a part of advisement. I'm not sure, as far as the depth that you are looking for, maybe with the financial sheet, I'm not
I was
certain.
more interested in if we have a student who chooses AP versus joint enrollment, what is the difference of the financial impact to the district, that the district receives funding for students? And how is that different for an AP student versus a joint enrollment
Okay,
student?
okay. So for an AP student, that's a part of our regular FTE.
Okay.
For dual enrollment students, we receive a portion of that from the state, and that goes to the general fund, but finance or one of the others may have to answer specifically where that money goes. FTE for AP would go directly back to that school.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Smith, then Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I have a quick question for you reflecting on page 6, just for clarity of this slide. So looking at school year 2024, it says that, and we're going to use Beach High School, it says that 379 represents the juniors and seniors in that school.
Combined for that year, yes.
For that year, okay. And out of that 379, we have 32 students that successfully completed the courses.
Correct.
Okay, so a couple of questions I have for you. One would be, do we have a set number of allowances that we would accept, or candidates or students that we would accept in a program throughout a year?
No, we don't have a cap.
As long as they meet the requirements, we are letting them.
They're
Okay.
allowed to participate, yes.
Okay. Tell me this, is that, that 32%, that's showing the successful candidates or students. Is there a way, or do we have the knowledge of knowing the unsuccessful rates or ratings, numbers?
I don't see Dr. May here, but we could get that information.
I think that
for
it's
you.
good to have a comparison, as well as my other question would be, when we look at the counselors on page 8 that we were talking about, when we look at the key strategies that we're looking towards, have any of the counselors on our side or the institution side stated any red flags or concerns that students have brought up to them?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is always maturity, because you have to understand that you are taking both high school and college courses. When you walk into that college classroom, they are no longer looking at you as Kim McGuire, the 11th grade student or the 12th grade student. You are Kim McGuire, a college student. And so sometimes understanding that if you're a few minutes late for a class, you're no longer present for that day. If you miss an exam, you have missed the exam. There's no makeup. And so that's a part of that orientation piece, and why we implemented that last year was to make sure that students understand that particular component. And then just working with our students as well on those advocacy skills. So a part of what we included in those orientations are, where do you go on the college's campus to seek help, and not waiting until you have received that first F or a D or what have you, but seeking those support systems early. So I think those are the biggest, challenges, getting students to understand this is a college environment. They're not treating you as a high school student, even though you are, and developing those advocacy and study skills that are needed to be successful at that level. Those have been the biggest things that I've heard.
Gotcha.
From both
Tell me
groups.
this, have we been receiving much parent involvement throughout this?
We do.
do?
We have a lot of parents. Even if the student does not indicate that they want to take a dual enrollment course, we get a call from the parent, and we schedule that meeting to have that advisement session. So yes, we do hear from parents quite frequently.
Awesome. Thank you for all that you do.
Mr. Johnson.
First off, thank you for your report. I actually like seeing these things with dual enrollments, because it means that our kids and families are saving money in the long run. That being said, just for future reference, or like in a summary page of how much money that these kids have been able to save for getting towards that college degree, I think that would show a lot. I know some high schools, they do mention that during graduations, but seeing it, comparing all the schools, I think that would be a good thing. And you had mentioned about, AP classes, not certain AP classes aren't always available at all those different schools, and just the amount of them. What are we doing with that to be able to offer courses at all the schools? Is it teachers? Is it interest? Is it just we're not there yet?
It's a combination of both. Teachers do have to participate in additional training, and a lot of times that occurs through those AP Summer Institutes. And so we have received some grants for schools to increase that participation or that training, I should say, for teachers so that they can offer those courses. But then also just trying to work on that recruitment piece, again, during pre-registration, making sure that students know that those courses are offered, and just how that aligns with their post-secondary plan. So it is a combination of both pieces, but we do have schools that are applying for grants to get more teachers trained in, areas of interest.
And if I could just add, this actually ties very nicely into the East Plus 5 conversation that we had last week in our workshop about programming. In addition to the things that Ms. McGuire offered, I think, and Ms. Hall's not here, but, in order for our students to have a readiness for dual enrollment and AP courses, it's a K-12 thing. It's not wait till you get to 10th grade and all of a sudden you're enlightened and you want to. So we got to make sure we're building those skills up for our students. And then it goes also back to what is that baseline experience that we want for every child, regardless of the high school you go to. There should be a baseline experience for every student to be able to take whatever, 5 AP courses, right? Anything you do above that is great, but the baseline experience should be there for every child so that we don't have an equity issue. Because to me, it comes down to equity. When you have a kid over here that's able to take a lot of classes and a kid over here that may only have limited opportunities.
And I appreciate that because I would love to be able to see more opportunities for more students at all of our high schools, because not only does it give them the opportunity, but it also sets a standard of rigor within our schools.
And again, it
Which
starts at kindergarten.
not only, yeah, it starts at, I'm not even going to say it starts at, kindergarten. I'm going to say it starts at pre-K. It starts at, at home with the parents and everything else. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we are showing the community that this is something that we are committed to, that we want to make sure that every child, no matter what their zip code is, has the opportunity when they graduate high school, if they choose to go to a post-secondary institution, that they already have the experience and the knowledge to be successful.
Agreed.
Mr. Moss?
Just one quick question. Do we provide transportation?
We do not, except for Savannah Early College.
Okay.
We have been able to do that with grants like through Gear Up Georgia and things of that nature, but at this time, we do not have that other than at early college.
Thank you.
And before you leave, we talked about the participation being, with Woodville, Tompkins, New Hampstead, and Savannah Arts. I know that the enrollment at, as you just said, we provide transportation for early college, and they have the lowest participation in the dual enrollment as compared to those 3 schools. I know that there are some talk about, some strategies that we're hopefully can implement to increase that enrollment. Are you prepared to talk a little about that?
Well, with Savannah Early College, they are exploring opportunities with Savannah State University, which is their partner institution, to identify ways that if you are an early college student, you've completed you're completing your dual enrollment courses there, that there may be an opportunity, like with the social work department, for example, to get that degree in a seamless way and in fewer years. So they are looking at partnerships like that to promote the program to more students. The counselor over there has been working consistently with the advisors on ways to do that, and also with recruiting to the middle schools to increase that enrollment and highlighting those partnerships that they have and the fact that they have transportation.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Now we'll ask Dr. Lewis, will you be providing the presentation for work-based learning? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Perry, and I will be presenting on work-based learning and the great and wonderful opportunities that our students are exposed to through work-based learning. As an overview, work-based learning is an opportunity to create awareness, exploration, preparation, and training for our students. Our students receive hands-on experience and training based on the work that they complete in the classroom during their career tech classes. The training is structured, the learning is authentic. Students have an opportunity to work with our industry partners and learn as much as possible while making a livable wage in many of the classes, employment that they have. Work-based learning was created in order for students to have a smooth and seamless transition to the world of work and or education beyond the high school. In order for students to qualify for work-based learning, they have to have taken at least one CTAE course. Those students that enroll are in the 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. As I stated earlier, they have to have a defined career pathway in order to participate in work-based learning. Those students have an opportunity to develop their employability skills. We have cooperative education, internship, youth apprenticeship, and we also work with those students that may qualify for Great Promise. Work-based learning coordinators are housed at each school, and we have a district coordinator as well. And we do have to have parent approval for students to participate in work-based learning, and they have to have a clearly defined career goal, good attendance, on track, especially on track for graduation, discipline record, reliable transportation, and we have students that are as young as 15 that work in work-based learning. This next slide shows the structure. Work-based learning falls under the Office of College and Career Readiness. Our focus is career awareness, exploration, instructional related, connecting, and then the actual work-based learning participants. We have one youth apprenticeship coordinator for the district. We also have a ready-to-work administrator that work with our middle and high school level students. And as I stated earlier, we have work-based learning coordinators at each of the schools. This next slide shows data of work-based learning courses that have been taken. We continue to increase the number of students that are taking work-based learning courses throughout the school year. If you look at each of the individual schools, there may be a slight decrease in some of the schools, and those decreases could be from students deciding to take an additional academic, core academic course. It could be they decide to pursue another career tech pathway, just in case they may want to get another certification, as well as dual enrollment. Amy?
Good morning. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about work-based learning in our schools. So this slide has our enrollment numbers for the past 3 years. It's got work-based learning earnings, unique work locations, and the hours worked. The work-based learning enrollment comes directly from Power School, and then the earnings, the work locations, and the hours worked come from CNET. CNET is the portal that the Georgia Department of Education uses to keep accurate records for work-based learning students. So our district work-based learning coordinator and our school work-based learning coordinators log into CNET weekly to put the information in that we receive from our students and from our employers. Okay. All right, so this next slide shows the 17 career clusters that the Georgia Department of Education recognizes. We also included fine arts, advanced academics, and foreign language. SCCPSS offers approximately 50 career pathways that fall under these 17 career clusters. So the chart that you're looking at shows pathway completion with work-based learning experience within these career clusters. So when we look at this, for example, 51% is from business management and administration, that cluster. That number is high because we offer multiple business pathways in our high schools. This chart shows that the top 5 career clusters where students have completed a pathway and are participating in work-based learning is business management and administration, healthcare science, hospitality and tourism, fine arts, and government. And a note about government, that includes our JRTC students and our law pathway students. As our pathways change and evolve to meet our region's workforce needs and initiatives, this chart will shift. So some of the points of pride that we're excited about in our work-based learning programs, I think one of the things we talk about a lot is business and industry is realizing that they need our kids, and they are willing to really meet us where we are and work with us, which is really, really great. We have more students this year at Gulfstream in our youth apprenticeship program than we've ever had before, and we have more Savannah-Chatham students working at Gulfstream than our surrounding school districts. This year, we also have hired students through our Equity Through Education grant to serve as interpreters, which has been very beneficial for those students to work in some of our schools with families. We continue to work with Evans General Contractors to raise awareness about our electrical youth apprentice program that's at Windsor Forest High School. We've expanded high school work experience with JCB, and then we're also looking for new employment opportunities with several companies that you can see up there: Mitsubishi, Wayfair, Port City Logistics, Georgia Ports, and so on. The last bullet up here, I want to make sure that you recognize that Savannah-Chatham County Public Schools work-based learning exceeds the state of Georgia's determined performance level for percentage of CTAE students that are enrolled in work-based learning. So the state's level of performance is 30%, and we are at 53.37%. Just some supports that we have in place. Dr. Lewis mentioned we have a work-based learning coordinator in every school, including CELA and Building Bridges. We also have a district work-based learning coordinator, and we try to work with schools to help promote work-based learning, market the program, help families understand the opportunities that students have through work-based learning. We go out and try to find different and unique career experiences for students that match their interest and their pathways. Some of our strategies for improvement, we've identified some of our schools that have really great work-based learning programs, and then we've identified schools that, have area for growth. Some of our programs that we think are really, really good, Woodville-Tompkins, they have a very high enrollment number of work-based learning students, but they are also very good at keeping the student interest as well as the pathway completion in mind. So they've got a pathway and interest alignment in their program is excellent. Islands High Schools increased their work-based learning numbers, and they've also changed a pathway at their school to be more in line with what the jobs that the students have, which I think is smart. And then Beach High School continues to have high enrollment numbers, but is also increasing medical career opportunities for their students, including our new partnership with Chatham Emergency Services. So kind of taking their best practices, partnering their administrators and their work-based learning coordinators with some of our schools that have an area for growth is something we're going to focus on this year. Positively speaking, Johnson High School, Jenkins, and Groves have a lot of room for growth, and we really think that we can work on not only increasing their enrollment numbers, but making sure the experience is a job that leads to a career or potential for a company to pay for that student to go to school or to advance their training. Some other ideas that we have, we want to continue sharing our work-based learning success stories from our previous graduates. We've done several stories on students that have gone straight into the workforce, and they're doing really well in their career. And then just working with scheduling teams to apply for work-based learning early and making sure their schedules line up for the opportunity. And then just trying to continue to talk to families to parents about the opportunity to leave school and work when they're juniors or seniors.
Okay, thank you for that wonderful information. Now I'm going to ask board members if you have any questions. Mr. Johnson?
So we know with the dual enrollment that they start talking to 8th graders. When do we start talking to the students and parents for the work-based learning?
We usually start in the middle school as well.
Okay, because I think that is a good idea, just because as long as they know what the opportunities are, especially since they do start a little bit earlier than a lot of the dual enrollment stuff. They can start a year earlier because of age restraints and grade restrictions. So I think that the more information we can give them up front and then be able to reinforce things as things change, the better off that not only the students will have the knowledge, but also the parents won't have to say, well, I didn't know. Because that's usually the kiss of death by getting parental buy-in. And I'm not saying we're not doing this already, but I also want to make sure that we're not just hitting the traditional middle schools, but we're hitting every K-8, every middle school, and we're also working with the charter schools as well. Because we've got one that's just middle school. We've got a lot of them that go, a lot of them go through our K-8s, and we have one that goes all the way through 12. So anything that we can do to coordinate our efforts as a district with those kids in the charter schools, because hopefully the ones that end in 8th grade, they're going to come back into the traditional public schools, and we want to make sure that those parents and those students are prepared as well.
Ms. Gabarski?
Thank you for the presentation, and I'm excited to see we're looking at growth opportunities, because I certainly think that our community is ripe to increase these opportunities. This is more, I guess, a comment to pass along to our communications team. I don't see Ms. Jennings, but I know one of the challenges, we have so many great programs and offerings, and getting that information out to parents can be difficult. And I was just looking at the website, like where we have information about AP, where we have information about workplace learning. I don't see information about dual enrollment on our website. So one thing I guess I would like our communications team to think about is, if you are a parent of a high schooler, here's a page for you. Here are all the opportunities to be thinking about as your student enters high school. If you're in middle school, have a link to, as you're making that transition, here are things to be thinking about. Because we have so much information, but you have to know either what it's called to Google it, to search for it, or how it's organized, and these two things are organized very differently. So that might be a strategy, because my son actually said, as a freshman in high school, and said something to me about workplace learning the other day, and I was excited that he's hearing about it at school, but that means that the student has to talk to the parents. So just a food for thought.
Thank you.
Oh, Mrs. Smith?
Thank you for your presentation so far. I have a quick question for you, and if we can look at the slide again on page 12. In my packet, it says page 12. It has the rubrics of the figures. I'm looking at Beach High School again. Yes. When we look at the numbers again, we have 379 enrolled, and then we have 90 that's a part of this program. Is that correct? 379 seniors.
Oh, we don't have that slide up here. Are you talking about the number of students that's enrolled in work-based learning?
Right, well, this slide says work-based learning, and it says school year 23, 24, total 11th and 12th graders enrolled, 379, and then it says number of students in work-based learning, it says 90.
Yeah, I would need to see it because we don't have that particular.
In the packet.
Part of the package. It's in the package.
We don't have that slide. So go ahead and ask your question. I probably can answer
My
it.
question is, well, can you tell me how many students we have as far as work-based learning at Beach High? Would you happen to know that number? And what I'm trying to get at is this. I wanted to know how many work-based teachers do we have at each school? How many are assigned to each school? When I see the number 90 at Beach, I was thinking that if it's only one, that might be a heavy workload for one. So I was trying to see if there were different numbers assigned at different schools as needed.
Well, actually, at Beach High School, we do have one work-based learning coordinator. They're a full-time work-based learning coordinator, so they're teaching 4 classes. So they can have as many as 34 students per class. They have, and for requirements of work-based learning, they have to have a planning, so that's why they're not teaching 4 classes. So when they are working with the students, so really having that many students, so they have about 90 students, that's about average, because they're not going to the job placements to review the kids every single day. They rotate to the businesses to speak with the employers. Also, when we supervise students, not only are the teachers supervising the students, but my office is supervising the students.
Gotcha.
Because we have a work-based learning coordinator for the district as well as a ready-to-work administrator. So when those teachers, like for example, if there's an emergency at a workplace and a teacher needs to go and they can't, we can go in and fill that place for the teacher. In order for a school to qualify for 2 work-based learning persons, they must have almost double the numbers.
Double the numbers, okay. I just wanted to make sure as far as, workers burnout, our teachers burnout, I didn't want to make sure they had good numbers there.
Absolutely, and also contact is not just in person, it may be by telephone. It can be, what you call the thing, by Teams or Zoom. So we make contact with them quite often.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when Dr. Lewis said they teach 4 classes, they are work-based learning coordinators during the 4 blocks. So that is their main job, is to be the work-based learning coordinator. They're not teaching, a business course on top of it. That's what they do all day, is focus on those students and those business partnerships and going out in the community to check on the students.
Awesome, thank you.
Mr. Moss, then Dr. Hoskins Brown.
I'm going to make this really quick because I know we've got another presentation coming up. I was in Bowling Green, Kentucky last week, and at Bowling Green High School, one of their pathways is computer repair. Their students repair all of the Chromebooks for not only that school, but for every school in that district. And those students are paid. So just an idea.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
I see that
Mr.
she's
Moss, I'm sorry.
documented it. Dr. Hoskins Brown.
Thank you. My question is quick, and it doesn't have to be answered now. I appreciate this information, everything. Every time I get this kind of information, I think about the old VOCA and VICA back from the 80s and how students would clamor to try and get involved in those opportunities. So I'm glad to see that they're perpetually popular. My question is about the number of young people that stay with that employer, or whether there are employers that bring on our students more than others, just in terms of our long-term success. Like, are there pathways or employers that more of our graduates end up with those organizations after graduation? Are there, just kind of a little more information about how we're looking at success, whether there are employers that are really, really good teaching and training partners, or whether there's some that are kind of emerging in terms of our student satisfaction with them, just kind of overall how we look at its success in this program.
Well, we can get you the exact number, but many of our students, especially those students that work at Gulfstream, those students are employed for 2 years. Then also Gulfstream may or may not offer them a scholarship or an opportunity to work after. Those students that participate in the aviation maintenance program at Groves High School, those students are promised positions. They apply, but they're promised direct hire positions, because at Gulfstream, normally they have to go through a temp agency, but with this particular program, because of the partnership that we have with Gulfstream and Savannah Technical College, because they get dual enrollment as well, and they're trained and they receive their certification prior to leaving high school, those students are direct hires, and they can come in making $50,000 at 18 years old. Then we also have students that work at the hospital. Those students are direct hires as well. And so they continue on with their employment. But to give you the exact number, we will have to pull that information. But we do have quite a few students that stay on, even with the logistics program there, with Colonial Oil, and with, we had the list of the IKEA. Those students are normally direct hires, and they stay on with those companies usually at least a year or two after high school.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the information I'm interested in, is 3 months after graduation, what percentage of our young people are, like this potential of you can earn $50,000, or this potential of you can be brought on as an employee and not a temp. I kind of want to know, are we reaching that potential after they graduate? And if we're not, and it's because of soft skills or something else that we can fix, I'd like to know what that is. So whatever it is that they're doing after graduation, that those potentialities are or are not being met. That's kind of what I'm interested in.
Right, and we still have students that were hired at Georgia Ports Authority that are still employed there today, so.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Hall?
This is just a fledgling idea right now, but I have been thinking about it for a couple of years. I'd like to see how we can transform our Building Bridges High School students from, problems to a potential to involve them with some of your programs, Dr. Lewis, where they get a purpose early on and can actually use that time that they're away from their home schools to their advantage. So I'll be talking with Dr. Watts about it a little more and with you, but I definitely feel that that's a potential that we could really turn a bad situation around and give those children some opportunity.
Yes, ma'am. Now, we do have work-based learning at Building Bridges, but I do understand what you're saying, because when many students are hired at some of these companies, they do a background check. So what we're trying to do is get to those students in the middle school to tell them that a quick decision they make today may affect them the rest of their lives. And there's nothing that we can do about that, especially if they can't pass the background check, because they have to get to that point. So making wise decisions early. That's why we start really at the elementary level and middle school level, but working with those kids. And we do have a work-based learning person there that has helped them get positions, and they also participate. We have 2 job fairs each school year, and they do participate in the job fair.
Okay, a step further than that, though, I want the companies to help us with this, because we can't, you're right, we cannot undo misdeeds, but if we have companies involved who understand that misdeeds don't have to be fatal, then they can help us, and give the child, okay, we're putting you on probation for 6 months, and we want to see this and this and this and this, and that'll wipe out some of that fluff over here that's holding them back. So it's definitely something the company would have to, and I think that's what Dr. Hoskins-Brown was saying, are we leveraging our relationships with all these different companies that work with us to our best advantage to make these programs as successful as we can?
Now, I will say this as a shameless plug. Jeff Jepson has really been wonderful with helping with the apprenticeship program that we're working on getting started with the construction trades and especially electrical. He has reached out to, he's been to several schools, as well as when we had our job fair. He will speak to those kids and they're asking pointed questions, which has helped tremendously. But we can also ask him to zero in on those things with answering those questions. If the child did not make not so wise decision, is that a hindrance from getting them to work on the job site?
Thank you so much for your presentation. You all are doing an awesome job. I tell you, when I'm in neighborhood meetings, and just to say what Ms. Grabowski talked about, communications, they still are talking about how wonderful it was to have shop and home economics and not really understanding what we actually do in the schools. And before you sit down, I do have one question about the work-based learning coordinator. I know that they're housed in the high schools, and from listening to you, they seem to be very busy throughout the day. So how are you communicating this into the middle schools? Are the counselors familiar with it? Are they assisting you all with the elementary level and the middle school level?
Yes, they work with the work-based learning coordinators in each of the schools do work closely with the counselors as well. Okay. But also we work with Ms. McGuire, or any communication that needs to be put out there. They help us put that out there. They help plan the job fairs when we were doing the 8th grade rotations. They help with that. Any type of activity that we have, like the Expo Books, Blanket, and Family Fund, where we're getting that information out. We work closely with the counselors as well as the administrators. If we have an employer that is looking for a specific child, I have reached out to principals and say, hey, here's the job description. Would you recommend a student? Because the principals know those students extremely well. And so we work collaboratively with them, but we also have a school to work administrator that work with the middle schools, and we do what is called QUEST, which is Quality Education Student Training and Tours. And we set up year-long job shadowing experience for those students. And then we also have the exposure at the elementary level, especially through the STEM programs that we have there, and making sure that those students understand that the programs that we offer at the high school, and then when we do Kids Biz, the students get an opportunity to have access to the students and the teachers at the high school level with their pathways.
Thank you so much. And if you will give us an electronic copy of your presentation, because we didn't have the pie chart within ours, and I would love to have a copy of that. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Now we're going to ask our presenters that will be talking about learning loss strategies.
And as we have Dr. Barnes and Selena Ruth Gillens come to the podium, I want to just preface their presentation on the mitigation of learning loss due to the storm disruptions. We know that that is a community concern. Our students missed a significant number of days of school, and parents have concerns, very valid concerns about their ongoing and continuous learning, so that there are not gaps in their learning. E-learning is just one strategy that we use as a part of a way to mitigate learning loss. Our biggest priority, though, is to make sure that each and every day in the classroom is an opportunity to maximize learning time. The instructional time missed in August and October does require a very intentional and deliberate approach over the school year. But beyond the time that, beyond the learning loss experience due to the storms, this district also uses e-learning as a strategy overall in terms of our calendar. And I am excited to continue to explore that opportunity to make sure that as we leverage e-learning as a strategy, we are taking a deep dive to ensure that we have the resources allocated to make that come to life. We have the alignment around what does quality e-learning look like. so that we are fully leveraging that model to minimize concerns that parents may be having. We're eliminating any technical barriers that students may be having. So I wanted everyone to know that we are taking a very close look at our e-learning strategy. We will be assessing that thoroughly. We may be changing some things to ensure that there's quality across the district, but it is just one piece of how we will mitigate learning loss moving forward. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Dr. Barnes.
Good afternoon, Board President, members of the board, and Superintendent Watts. As Superintendent Watts mentioned, as we speak today on the mitigation of learning loss due to storm disruptions, it is important to remember that e-learning is only a part of that topic. And so our primary focus is how do we maximize teaching and learning during the time in which we have students present in school.
Stand by.
So as a quick overview of the e-learning day, our primary teaching and delivery model is to ensure that instructional tasks are designed to provide students with independent learning experiences that actually extend no more than half of their regular learning time, but also provides an asynchronous opportunity where teachers may provide at least 30 minutes of virtual tutorial hour sessions. As an overview of what students might be doing on that particular day, first, they will be logging into the learning management platform to access their instructional task. They will be completing those tasks, and as they're completing those, they may communicate with their teachers via email and within the learning management platform to continue to get ongoing support from teachers. One of the things that we want to make sure we note that in the event, because sometimes students do not have access to connectivity or may not have a device at home, that if they're not able to complete those assignments at that time, they can complete those assignments and submit them once they return back to school and to earn full participation. Teachers on a particular day, so that we have an understanding of what happens on the 2 different days. On the district e-learning day, teachers actually engage in a half-day professional development that helps support their teacher development and instructional planning while students are at home. And then on an inclement weather day, teachers may engage in instructional planning and have additional opportunities to provide direct support to students.
Good afternoon. As we speak to mitigating learning loss, we want to think about time and quality. Dr. Watts mentioned that, and of course, we are concerned with the amount of time that students are not in the classroom, but we also want to focus on the quality that they're receiving. We want to make sure that the practice sessions, the work is intentional, and that it is targeted based on student needs. So instead of just focusing on duration of instruction, we want to really focus on effectiveness of instruction and content delivery. In addition, compacting curriculum, adjusted assessment calendars, and school-based extended learning opportunities are all strategies that mitigate learning loss. Compacting curriculum works extremely well for our students who are gifted and advanced. It also works for our students in helping them to understand and see the bridge between foundational skills and what they may have learned in a previous grade and what they're learning currently. We have streamlined instruction that comes through the year at a glance that's provided through curriculum instruction, and that is designed for all content areas. As far as the adjustment of assessment calendars, we do make emphasis on the semester-based courses for high school, but we also look at the benchmarks and making sure that additional time is provided for Amira and iReady as well. School-based extended opportunities, they come from boot camps or intersessions that schools may use before or after school programs, as well as Saturday school. So while every student may not experience the same type of learning loss, we know that when they are not in the classrooms for any extended period of time, that they will definitely benefit from strategies to help them recover learning loss that may occur from being out of school for school closure, e-learning days, whatever the disruption may be. We just want to make sure that our teachers know and they understand that the strategies that they implement will benefit all of our students. We have specific strategies that we can use across the board, whether it's a part of compacting the curriculum or if it is focusing on target areas for students. In here, reviewing the key concepts, revisiting foundational concepts and skills help to solidify understanding for our students. So it is important that our teachers go back and review with them. Differentiated instruction. Here you can look at the level of rigor that is needed and how you're going to group students based on their needs and how you meet individual student needs. Our formative assessments allow our teachers to see where our students are, what learning loss may have occurred, and where they can begin with the students in their classrooms. And it is extremely necessary to provide that positive reinforcement with all of our students. Reassure them that you understand that they may be having difficulty, but you are going to provide them what they need to recover. Collaborative learning. Of course, we learn very well from our peers, and our students do the same. So we want to make sure that while we are working on mitigating learning loss, that we're also encouraging engagement and allowing our students to work together. So when we speak to planning with each child in mind, a part of our strategic goals is to make sure we're addressing our diverse learners. And whenever we have our children out for any form of disruption of learning, we want to make sure that we're addressing our students with disability as well as our EL students, and that any learning loss will be recovered and it will resume as soon as the reopening of the brick and mortar building. As for our special education students, compensatory services may be needed, and we will provide those based on each student's individual needs. Some of the guiding considerations that we speak to with our teachers in the schools is what students' current ability to access distance learning. Dr. Barnes spoke to that about our learning management system. Are there specific types of distance learning strategies that would be more appropriate? We're still investigating how we can continue to engage our students, even if they're not using technology at that time. We do have our choice boards and built-in assignments in the learning management system. So we are continuing to work towards making sure we have the most appropriate strategies for our students. Barriers for regarding frequency and length of time. Again, we look at time, and it is very important, but we still want to encourage and focus on more the intentionality of our instruction to our students. And for those students that require assistive technology who are students with disability, they are allowed to use those devices at home as well as at school. So when we speak to a continuum of interventions for our vulnerable learners, we want to make sure that we focus on the different support levels based on the individual student needs. The continuing to ensure that our students with disabilities and ESOL students receive the necessary support. We have what's included as a distant learning plan in their IEPs. This works for our 504 students as well. And we want to make sure that FAPE is covered when we have disruptions to learning. And we do this through this plan, and it includes the goals and specific goals for students in the acquisition of skills based on their IEP or 504 plan. Scaffolding instruction and differentiation. These are additional interventions that we're going to use with our students. We make sure that teachers understand that scaffolding techniques help to build those foundational skills, and it also allows them to go back to reference those foundational skills as they work to help students recover and move forward. Differentiated assignments, all of them don't need the same thing at the same time, and this is where small group work helps one-on-one support or sometimes extended time in after school or Saturday opportunities where they can receive differentiated work. Of course, providing visuals and hands-on learning for our students is very important, and this also helps with engaging our students in different ways. We look at targeted interventions and tiered support, and then the use of paraprofessionals or tutors to support our students, and again, going back to peer collaboration. We're also mindful that whenever we have disruptions to the learning environment, that we need to check on our students and make sure we understand what their social emotional learning needs are. We want to make sure that in schools they are incorporating SEL to help students manage stress, especially if there was a storm and they received damage at home or whatever the case may be that caused some angst for our students. We want to make sure that we are tapping in and looking at what they need as far as their social emotional needs. This can be done through morning check-ins or morning meetings with students. And also mindfulness practices are a great tool that we use with our students to help reduce anxiety and to engage fully in the learning. In addition, and finally, we must include our families in this work. Credit recovery, mitigating learning loss, we need to make sure that the parents are in the loop, that they understand and are informed about the learning expectations and the strategies that they can use at home. And we, of course, partner with local organizations who provide additional resources to our schools, after school, our 21st century programs, and then providing family with materials at home that they can use to help build our students' resilience to help mitigate learning loss.
Thank you so much. And we'll start with Dr. Hoskins-Browns, then Ms. Hall, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. This is
Mr.
really
Moss.
helpful information. I have two questions. One about the timeline of kind of when we activate, whether the plan is going to be technology dependent or packet dependent when we have a major disruption. So I'm thinking of disruption. Certainly storm closures are one, and we learned a lot in the last one. Sometimes technology served us really well, and sometimes when you have the greatest power outage in all of Georgia Power's history, then
Yes.
that doesn't work. You know, there's nothing we can do to mitigate that.
Right.
But I've also heard from families that a young person is experiencing a major illness that's mandating long-term absence. So
Yes.
there's massive facility failure, like a fire, as we have had in a school in recent years, or like a flood, or there is extreme weather and power outages, or long-term illness. In those cases, how do we decide, or what is our kind of our timeline to plan that, you know what, we probably need to print several hundred packets, we need to be package dependent in this, or we need to focus on technology? Like, is that part of our planning diagram for risk mitigation?
I would probably say there is an overutilization of paper versus technology that is currently sent home.
Okay. I received that and just have to trust that you're saying that it is true. But in as much as I talk about marine science in my school board meetings, I went to a marine science meeting and I got a whole lot of feedback from parent marine scientists about not having packets in the last storm because of the major Georgia power outage. And so I don't, so that was the question.
Not having physical packets or not having technology?
Not being able to use technology and therefore wanting paper packets. So there were some in this room, about 100-some people. There were some people who had young persons whose teachers made a packet. So not having technology didn't make a big deal because they weren't behind. We had some parents who were supposed to be using technology, but everybody's power was out, and learned that some people had packets and some didn't. And that's why I wish we had packets, because then I would have had the work for my child.
I think in my preface statement, we have an opportunity to evaluate and assess what we're doing to make sure that every student, for e-learning days, for days that we have to miss, and we're using e-learning as a strategy, there is a need to reassess what we're doing across the district to make sure that those experiences at home are quality.
Okay. And
That makes sense.
yeah, it's helpful. I mean, I didn't have the answer. I didn't have the answer there, and I don't have the answer here either. But I said, well, I'm going to take this as homework and bring it to the conversation. And when you were talking, I don't know if this is worthwhile, but should we have a radio button somewhere that parents say what their delivery method should be in extreme circumstances? I know that's a pain in the butt, because then you would have to differentiate that that may be more work than is practical. But for me, when I had a learner in the house, because of how that person learned, I really would have needed paper. And when I didn't get paper, I printed it. But that's a bigger discussion. I just wanted to ask that question. How do we decide in those cases? And I'm okay not having a firm answer today. My other question, I think, is easier. So the social emotional learning that we facilitate, one of the resources that I learned about recently in the Sapelo Island tragedy is the availability of Georgia 988 for mental trauma that is not exclusively suicide. And I'm wondering whether or not we have that level of awareness about the use of 988, where individuals can call or text that number anywhere in the state of Georgia, indicate that they are experiencing mental stress, mental trauma, and be on the line with a certified counselor within a few minutes, like I said, via text or voice, as an extra resource for all of us, our teachers, our young people, given that we know that we don't have the right number, we don't have enough social support in that area. Is that something that's inside our strategies?
So yes, through our wellness center. Matter of fact, one of the strategies that was mentioned about with the SEL component, our Wellness Center offered a session for teachers and for others about how you navigate after a storm. The 988 resources were included. We've actually had some students to utilize them at school, and the school counselor got a call to then assist that student. The school counselor and the administrator got a call. So that information is out there. We do work to make sure at all of our Wellness Center events that we have the flyers that are available. We also are working with Resilient Coastal Georgia to make sure that we are sharing that information as well. So we're having multiple touch points to make sure our counselors are aware of 988, families are aware of it. You know, we have the little postcards for teachers as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think 988 is really important. I think that we've seen incidents across our district under other different scenarios where that resource may have been helpful. Storms and being out of school and out of your normal environment is really, really stressful. It's hard to focus on a packet or technology if you don't even know when you're going back to school. So thank you for letting me know that.
Is Ms. Hall, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Smith, Mr. Moss, then Ms. Skabarsky.
Mine is real quick. Dr. Gillens, I see a lot of gems in your presentation here. One thing I always like to see is the word intentional, so that you know that it's not something that just, you know, you happen to come upon it, but it's, you know, and I hope that intentionality goes down as far as the classroom to the teachers. But in terms of these engagement groups, I know if we were out for a week because of a storm and I was falling behind, I would feel much more inclined to try to do my work and get caught up if Sean and Dion and Denise were part of my group.
Yes.
And the four of us were, you know, that interaction would make a big difference as opposed to me trying to just grapple with it on my own. So I do hope that the teachers will intentionally create these groups of learners who can depend on each other and,
Yes,
you know.
and we are providing guidance, you know, to support the teachers in their efforts, and peer collaboration is a huge part of those strategies because we do recognize that they do learn better when they are working with their peers.
Yeah, and I guess the intentionality part is I don't just say, let me call Dion and see does she want a world, but that group is already
And our
formed.
teachers know how to use small groups with their students. They know those students, how well they work together, so they
Okay.
are able to identify and give them those opportunities to work together.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible because I'm pretty sure we can spend like 3 hours on these topics. First one is when you talked about the adjusted assessment calendars, I do know that there's been a disconnect between GMAT scores and what their grades are in the classroom at certain schools and everything, and getting those to be more in line. And so we actually know that if a kid has an 85 in a class, he's going to get basically the equivalency of a B in the higher percentiles on GMAS. So are we working with certain schools that disparity isn't as great, working with those principals, administrators, whether it's a district school or a charter school, to see what processes are they using and maybe start doing pilot programs and working to be able to expand it out at a greater level? That's my first question.
Great question, and so it's always an interesting phenomenon to see how students perform in class versus how they perform on state testing, and sometimes there's a correlation and sometimes it's not. So what we're beginning to really dig deep on is ensuring that the rigor of what students are taught in class matches the rigor in which they are assessed on state assessments. And also the metacognition that happens on the state assessment is the same thinking and how we engage them in text-dependent question, substantiating evidences in the classroom to be able to answer those questions. The protocol that we are beginning to look at is how to start doing weekly data meetings to break down assessments, look at what the misconceptions are and reteach to that. And so once we reteach the misconceptions, it most likely sets the students up to be able to perform better on a state assessment. So, it's a layered question, because what happens now is we got to make sure that the assessments in the classroom also matches the assessment level in which students are tested at the state. And so we got to make sure that is aligned, and then we're able to break it down to see what the misconceptions are and teach to that misconception.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question is, when we talk about school-based extended learning opportunities with after-school support, before-school support, and Saturday school support, I think I know what the answer is, but I just want to make sure. Is transportation provided or not for those things? Or is that up to the parent who might not have the opportunity because they're having to work 2 or 3 jobs to be able to do that?
Transportation isn't provided at this time. The only after-school program that has transportation is our 21st Century program, and we have that in 24 of our schools. So transportation is provided for those students who participate in that program. Otherwise, it is up to the parent.
Okay, and thank you for that. And now, e-learning days. Not a big fan of e-learning days personally as a parent. I know some kids do fine with e-learning, but I think we learned from the pandemic, most kids don't. I think we need, as a district, we need to reevaluate how we use e-learning days. Should it be just for emergency reasons, emergency purposes? However, as we learned from the last hurricane, that doesn't always work because we have power outages. There are, even if someone has access and charged up their devices and trying to use their phone as a hotspot, cell towers could be down. So I see there's pros and cons to it. It's a difficult way to navigate. However, I don't think that actually having e-learning days as on the calendar for certain days, to have teachers doing professional development, but they're also supposed to be doing, helping with the tutoring or whatever, office hours online, that actually puts more stress on teachers because they're having to do both still. So why not just take e-learning days out, give them a professional day? We are a waiver district, so we don't have to have that magical 180 days that, a status quo district has to have. We need to make sure that not only, yes, we need to focus more on the quality of instruction rather than the butts in the seat. And we need to make sure that e-learning days are used only in extreme measures, but we have the technology and we have it, but not use it as basically a cop-out saying that, oh, well, we're going to do an e-learning day so our teachers can have a professional development day, because that doesn't work for teachers. I hear it all the time that teachers don't like that because they feel like they're getting pulled in both directions. And if the professional learning day with that class, if that goes over time, then they're not on their computers to be able to deal with their students like they're supposed to be doing, and then they get docked for that by the administrations on site. So I think it's something that we need to look at as a district. The other thing is, when it comes to inclement weather, if we're not able to use technology and we talk about packets and everything else, a lot of times, and especially if we have roads with our tree canopy, which is absolutely beautiful and what makes our city great, people can't get to the sites to be able to get those packets. So I think we also need to look, when we look at inclement weather, figure out a way that we don't add extra stress to families. I know when I first came on the board that and a lot of y'all can, say this, that I was a big proponent that we need to have the kids in the seats and we need to make up the time no matter what, because it's the right thing to do. Being on the board and having the experiences, and not only as a board member, but also as a parent, I've realized it adds the stress to the families. We need to look at what's best for the students, for their social and emotional well-being. So the time aspect, to me, it's kind of a moot point. We are a waiver district. We need to do what's in the best interest, not only of our students, but also for our teachers and staff. Thank you.
Mrs. Smith?
The questions that I had were already addressed, so I'll give my time away. Thank you.
Thank you for yielding your time. Now, Mr. Moss.
Okay. So I think it was last month we had the presentation from Ms. Taylor on ROI.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to the ROI on e-learning.
Ms. Gabowski, then I'll come back to Dr. Hoskins.
I just want to remind that at the beginning of this presentation, Dr. Watts gave the preface that we know we need to look at e-learning. So I think we're all on the same page with that.
Yes.
The only quick thing I'll add is as we introduced that as a strategy to help our teachers out, but we need to obviously think about the students. And as we're thinking about that, I hope we're also thinking about differentiation in age levels, because I think we know that middle and high schoolers have a higher capacity for that independent learning
Yes.
than our younger scholars, but we've been trying to use an across-the-board K through 12. So as we're evaluating these approaches, I hope that we will look at innovative ways to be able to provide that planning time, but look at how we may need to work with our youngest scholars in a different way, because obviously they are still young learners. Thank you.
Yes, and that is a big part of why we need to be more intentional in looking at what our students' needs are. And that statement about resuming the work as soon as they're back in brick and mortar, trying to recover, working on foundational skills, I think that is how we begin to address the needs for our younger students while we work to discover what other innovative models that we can use to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students.
Okay, Dr. Hoskins Brown,
Thank you.
then Mr. Cashmore.
So I didn't say how much I appreciated the strategy that I see in this presentation, and I do really appreciate it. I see the expertise in it and the depth of thoughts. I wanted to acknowledge that. I also just wanted to clarify my interest in how we're getting out the content is really about the process that happens before dismissal. Once dismissal happens, then we're done. I'm not thinking that we need to be going anywhere, picking up no packet. No, it's a done deal
Yes.
when we get out early, because whatever is, when something wicked this way comes, it's done. I'm not thinking about anybody coming into the schoolhouse. And maybe there are strategies that you all as professionals know better than we. So, for example, the challenge with technology for some of the individuals who may have, given concerns to me, may have been that you had to get it in the cloud. And a lot of people have good strategies to maintain power to their devices, but not internet to their devices.
Yes.
So some people could possibly use technology if their packet is downloaded. If they're given a prompt that says, here's your learning, here's your packet, hurry up and download it before the worst comes, then they're still working on technology and not dealing with a packet. I happen to have a jump drive that has the USB that I can connect my jump drive to my phone and do whatever it is that I need to do using a jump drive. So I'm really interested in knowing the process of how do we decide how we're going to move before that last dismissal that maintains connectivity in the best way. And I don't want anybody to come and egg my house over this, but I'm okay with a makeup day. We do a lot of this because we're trying to avoid, and she just groaned. I'm okay with a makeup day. Like, how much time do we spend managing not having learning loss on technology when we could just have another learning day? And I'm open to the recommendations from you all from when that needs to happen, whether we spend 36 hours trying to manage 8 hours of learning, or whether we just come back to school another day and have that learning. I'm open to hearing from you.
And certainly, the bringing students back to school instead of using e-learning as a strategy was something that was contemplated. The days that were set aside for makeup days were the first 2 days of Thanksgiving break and the first 2 days of spring break. So the other thing that factored into that was attendance. How many students and teachers have already made plans for those days, and will we take a hit on attendance if we bring students back? So it's a multi-factor situation. That's why we need to do a deep dive and reevaluate.
And Dr. Watts didn't mention, but she's been very intentional with the communication, getting to our administrators, letting them know what may possibly be coming and the changes that may arrive through SEMA conversations and so forth. So if we're there and it's going to be a half day, there is time to prepare so that our students are able to have directives on what needs to occur at home as it relates to their learning.
Mr. Cashmore.
I appreciate the comments on the timing of makeup days and in particular, the calendar year and when this occurred. If we had missed 10 days in the fall and then another 15 days in January, February, historically, we've looked to have actual makeup days as we get closer to, the second semester. And I'm a little confused. Everybody's like bashing e-learning. I don't think we've ever said we're going to adopt e-learning as our prime educational strategy. We've implemented an e-learning pathway for families for whom they prefer that path. But my understanding of e-learning was it was always a way to try to keep learning going when we could not be physically in school.
Yes.
So it wasn't a replacement, but it was a way to try to have something going on when otherwise we would have nothing going on. And I just want to be careful that we don't overcorrect on an event that's happened every 8 years. So we were out for a week, a little less than a week because of this hurricane. Last time we were out for that long of a period of time, I think was 2016 or 2017, where we had back-to-back hurricanes in like September, October. And the physical situation at the schools was more than a third of our schools we couldn't access because of power, because of water, et cetera. So, and between those days and the pandemic, we got really good at e-learning. And when we implemented e-learning and professional development days, it was for practice. It was not as a substitution for learning. It was we're going to have a periodic e-learning day to make sure we can all do it in case we really need to go on an extended e-learning pathway. I mean, that was my recollection coming out of the pandemic when we started returning to school. We said we're still going to have 1 or 2 or 3 e-learning days a year just to practice, to make sure we can all do it, the technology's working, et cetera, but not as a substitute for in-person learning.
Okay, well, that's new information.
Well, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but like I see people out there shaking their heads. So I'm all for, I mean, the ideal situation would be to tailor education and tailor makeup to how that kid learns. My student is fine with e-learning because she cranks it out in an hour and a half. Other students are not, and they need in-person. But we also can't do a la carte all the time because we don't have the staff, we don't have the technology, et cetera. So I agree with everything that was discussed today about the challenges with e-learning and the challenging with makeup days when we have extended period of time missed. All I'm saying is let's not overcorrect for something that's happened twice in 8 years. Let's take a measured approach to e-learning. And I always thought it was a way to continue time missed as opposed to a supplement for the real learning that happens.
See a lot of eyes and I'm going to make a comment and then maybe we can just email any additional questions because it's 12:30. But what I like to say is, prior to my retirement, I recall unpacking the standards. So now I'm looking at curriculum compacting. So as I unpack the presentation, there's 2 things that really stood out to me. That was high quality instruction and differentiation. If we do that, we can make it. If we do that, we can have success. If we can do that, we can really go back to our waiver which says in exchange for high expectations and student achievement. So that means that in Ms. Gillen's class, everybody will not have the same packet. In Ms. Gillen's class, everybody will not have the same information on the thumb drive or the online assessments. So the key to all of this is the high quality instruction and differentiated instruction. Yes. And so I appreciate you all honing in on that and hopefully that it's mastered, because as opposed to the waiver, which is a contract between the local Board of Education and the state that gives us the flexibility to have those days waiver in the form of a waiver as it pertains to state law. but the key word in that, as I unpack again, is in exchange for high expectations and student achievement. So in exchange for, if we can just continue with high-quality instruction and differentiated instruction, I think we'll be okay. With that being said, can I have a motion to close this meeting?
I move.
Second. Thank you
Adjourned.
all.
So I need to accept a motion
Oh,
for us to
okay.
go into executive session.
I move that we go into the executive
Yeah.
session for the discussion of safety, legal matters, and all those things that Lee says we have to say, personnel. And other stuff.
Thank you.